English translation 666th contact Saturday, the 3rd of December 2016, 15:07 hours.
Here I am, dear friend. Greetings and welcome again, Ptaah.
My greetings also to you, Edouard, dear friend. Thank you also for your welcome.
If you do not mind, I would like to ask you a question right at the beginning of our conversation about the drug ayahuasca, which we talked about privately last year.
What other question do you have?
It is a reader's question, and it is this one. But look, this is the question. Elizabeth has already answered it briefly in accordance with what I explained to her, but I said that I would go into more detail in a bulletin. The reason was that I wanted to check with you. If you want to read them, please do. One moment, telephone. It was Bernadette.
Apparently a bit lengthy, but I want to read it.
Question: ayahuasca and dimethyltryptamine, because of some reports with opposing opinions and evaluations about the natural intoxicant ayahuasca. I have noted a few questions below and wanted to ask you if you might be able to help. Ayahuasca is a drink which is drunk in Amazonia by the native peoples. The drinking happens with a kind of ritual which a shaman carries out. First one drinks the allegedly very bitter drink, and after a short time the shaman begins with a song. The drink brings the user into a noisy state, which lasts for outsiders approximately 15 minutes. The user perceives this time span as much longer. The time between drinking the drink and the onset of intoxication varies from user to user. For one, it can start shortly after drinking. For the next, it can take 2 hours until the effect starts. During the noise phase, the users tell of many patterns and colors that are seen. These patterns, similar to music pictures for us, should be singable among primitive peoples, so that one person can sing what is seen in intoxication, and the next person can paint the pattern correctly through this singing. A shaman can influence the patterns just seen by the user with his singing. If only the user drinks the drink, the shaman has no knowledge of what the user is going through. If the shaman also drinks ayahuasca, he is supposed to be exactly where the user is and could act if necessary. The effect is achieved by singing and hitting the user with a tuft of leaves, the purpose of which is to divert negative energies. The first times of the application, the user should vomit strongly. This is intended to eliminate negative vibrations and make the body feel more comfortable. Vomiting is then also the end of the intoxication. In general, the users talk about a kind of inner cleansing, liberation from stress, and as a result, a better memory should be available, whereby in general also a certain healing is spoken of. The drink ayahuasca consists of the following plants: ayahuasca liana banisteriopsis caapi, containing harmon alkaloids Chacruna psychotria viridis or chalaponga; Diplopteris cabrerana, containing DMT. DMT =dimethyltryptamine is a substance that should be present in every living body. Taking it by smoking or vaporizing should lead to altered states of consciousness, and there is also talk of experiencing a greater reality than is experienced in a normal waking state. The effect of DMT lasts about 15 minutes, and it is claimed that the pineal gland is decalcified by DMT. The drink ayahuasca is obtained by boiling up the plant parts described above. This boiling up can take several days by open fire, and it develops a dark-colored drinkable broth, or depending upon the recipe, a kind of syrup, which one can spoon. Now, there are very contrary opinions and views about ayahuasca and DMT. Some claim that both should be legalized, as it is not a drug and only serves to increase awareness. The others say that without an accompanying shaman, one can suffer permanent psychological damage and, depending on the condition of the user, also go on infernal trips. Without a shaman, he might not be able to end such a hell trip state himself. Now, a few questions remain unanswered, and I wanted to ask you if you still have some information about ayahuasca and DMT that will satisfy my thirst for questions. I'd be interested. 1. Can the intake of DMT or ayahuasca cause long-term physical damage? 2. Is it necessary that a shaman accompanies the session and can intervene? Because a negative situation could not be resolved after all. 3. Do the two means DMT and ayahuasca really serve the expansion of consciousness? Could they perhaps support meditation? 4. Or is the effect short-term or long-term to be classified as dangerous? 5. Would the use of means anticipate a goal to be achieved through learning and practicing? So that perhaps a skill to be learned is not learned, but would be needed for further development and thus hamper further development. Thank you very much, Ralph Gandhi, Germany.
It is really a little lengthy, and somebody's knocking on the door. I must have a look.
It is awkward when we are disturbed. It should be taken care that we can talk in peace, or have you forgotten to put the small sign next to the door?
I did not? No.
Then I do not understand why it is ignored when there is nothing urgent or important going on.
I guess it's inattention, but I am going to go check it out now. There was no one outside. Apparently, someone's patience is torn because the two of us have only just talked together. But now I think you can turn to the answer.
I'd like to be a little more specific about that. Ayahuasca Banisteriopsis caapi is a liana species from the Malpighiaceae family. A bitter-tasting potion is made from the plant parts, especially the stems and leaves. So ayahuasca, a hallucinogenic drink, is produced from several plant components or main components, which is used especially by rainforest Indians on the upper reaches of the Amazon. The liana, like the trunk, is also called ayahuasca itself, and corresponds to a plant brew which influences the mental and psychic feelings. The rainforest Indians on the upper reaches of the Amazon use the brew for necromancy, whereby they have become deluded that the plant souls themselves have taught them to brew this psychoactive drink from components of the Banisteriopsis caapi liana and the leaves of the chacruna bush. In general, this plant is native to the tropical zones of the South American subcontinent. Ayahuasca, this name comes from the Quechua language and means as much as liana of spirits. The appearance of the plant varies greatly, as a result of which the liana plant, or Banisteriopsis caapi, is not only known under the name ayahuasca, but is also reflected in several synonyms depending on the region. Banisteria caapi, Spruce ex Griesbach, Banisteria quaitensis, Niedenzu, Banisteriopsis inebrians Morton, and Banisteriopsis quaitensis Niedenzu Morton. Also, in various countries, the plant is called differently. So in Colombia, Yag, ayahuasca, Yaga del Monte, Yaga sembrado. In Ecuador, ayahuasca, Natema nepe. In Peru, ayahuasca, ayahuasca amarilla, purga huasca, ciele ayahuasca negra, shurifisopa. And in Brazil, caapi yage kaupuri mariri, mau de onca, tiwaco mariri. Also terms like caapi, natema, dapa, yagejahe, yajejahe, natem sipo, daime, or hoasca yege are common. The brew of the liana Banisteriopsis caapi has a psychedelic effect, as do the N,dimethyltryptamine-containing leaves of the coffee shrub Chacruna psychotria viridis, a coffee shrub also known as sacrament of the spirits of the Amazon. Beside Banisteriopsis caapi, the most important ingredient to the famous Amazonas drunk, or ayahuasca, is chacruna. It uses the leathery leaves of a tropical shrub that loves humidity and warmth and brews the ingredients of these two plants together. While neither yag nor chacruna alone have a significant effect, the mixture of both plants exerts a powerful reaction on the psyche. The brew contains Harmon alkaloids, which act as monoamino-oxidase inhibitors, and thus activate the active ingredient N,N-dimethyltryptamine DMT. The members of various Amazon ethnic groups, as explained, use ayahuasca in ritual religious ceremonies to put themselves into a state of trance. The use is widespread in Amazon, Brazil, Bolivia, in the Orinoco Delta of Venezuela, in Peru, and as far as the Pacific coast of Colombia and Ecuador. In addition, various ayahuasca religions emerged in Brazil in the 20th century, such as União do Vegetal, Barquina, and Santo Daime, which are popular and widespread among the middle class in the cities, but which have also become internationally present in the meantime. The religious use of the drink or intoxication is not only legally guaranteed in Brazil, but was also legalized in the USA on the 21st of February 2006 by a decision of the Supreme Court following the Gonzalez v. O Centro Espírita Beneficente União do Vegetal trial. The psychedelic brew is also sold in Europe and, of course, traded on the internet. In principle, it can produce both positive and negative experiences and effects, but consumption definitely affects mental balance, and it is undoubtedly an addictive drug. The plant brew ayahuasca is also called potion of true reality, and used by shamans and medicine men to enable them to travel to the world of myths to make contact with spirits. Which is nonsense, of course, because the ayahuasca brew truly causes hallucinations. The plant world in the Amazon is extremely diverse, so that many psychoactive plants can be found among them, which are also often harmless if they are not processed together with other plants to porridge or potion, etc. The two plants yag and chacruna are also harmless plants. But when they are combined to a brew, it becomes a hallucinogen, which also strongly influences thoughts, feelings, and the psyche. By mixing components of the two plants, yag and the chacruna, a strong psychotropic substance, a psychoactive substance. A psychotropic or a mixture containing an active substance is created, whereby this active substance strongly influences the human psyche and causes uncontrollable delusional hallucinations, which are also influenced and controlled by delusional ideas, such as religious and sectarian or natural beliefs. The plants which, as already mentioned, occur in the rainforest of South America and from which the ayahuasca brew is brewed, are also called holy master plants, whereby these are used for ritual purposes. The ayahuasca potion is therefore a combination of the ayahuasca liana and chacruna and a trance brew. The ayahuasca ceremony causes a delusional transformation in the entire human body, but the corresponding effect of the ayahuasca brew is naturally strongest in the area of origin. Because in the Amazon rainforest, the fresh plants rich in active ingredients are used directly for the brew. However, there is no spiritual journey with the ayahuasca brew. Nor is there any expansion of consciousness, but only a hallucinatory and physical effect, which can also have an addictive effect as well as damage to consciousness and psychological disorders. So there is also no high vibrating energy in the body through the ayahuasca brew. But the use of the brew clouds the clear thoughts and destroys over time the self-responsibility and the healthy behaviors, which is why it is incomprehensible why the drug was legalized in the civilized world and is freely marketable, which on the other hand could be processed into an effective antidepressant. So the psychodrug is the product of two rainforest plants which, when used by humans, can have many faces, because the effects mix with delusions, hallucinations, and reality. Therefore, it is advisable to weigh correctly whether the Earth human being wants to get involved in an ayahuasca experience, because the use of the drug is not harmless, because the hallucinatory effect is indelibly imprinted physically, psychologically and consciously, and in addition a change of thoughts and feelings, and thus also of the psyche and possibly also of the character, personality, and behavior is definitely caused. Whoever stupidly, unreasonably, and perhaps selfishly hopes through the ayahuasca brew to be able to fathom any secrets of life, etc., is mistaken and should be warned in this regard, just as if irresponsible attempts are also made with the brew to achieve better and good meditation successes, to free himself from worries or to want to solve problems. Especially when the person is unstable, the whole thing quickly leads to severe psychological problems and dependence. The Incas called the liana grapevine of the souls, but also whip of the dead. And just as these imaginative names of the psycho drink are, so too are the false hopes associated with them and the numerous legends that entwine around this mysterious liana and the chacruna leaves. The alleged magic potion is therefore, as I said, especially not recommended for unstable people, as all psycho drugs are never recommendable at all. And this is also the case when the rainforest Indians on the upper reaches of the Amazon have been using the plant brew for ritual purposes since time immemorial, and have fallen into the delusion that they could talk to ghosts in ayahuasca intoxication.
To my knowledge, the hallucinogenic ayahuasca has been particularly popular in the New York scene and among hobby drug tourists in the Amazon. But now the drug, which is made from lianas and leaves, is also spreading in Switzerland, as I know. This especially thanks to shaman rituals, which are performed on both sides of the Rostgraben. It cannot be true. Now someone is interrupting again, but I think that this time we just disregard it.
Then I want to talk about two things that are unpleasant in nature. Firstly, I have to explain that Anjana and Florina have been instructed by me over the last few months to observe the behavior of after their return, but this has not exactly been positive. I must therefore say that the following must be addressed as a warning, and you must also inform us. The second thing relates to because now we have exactly what we discussed last year, whereby this weekend a supposedly S will be put forward, but that will not correspond.
This is indeed unpleasant, but of course I will act according to your instructions, and the other was clear from the start. So what we knew months ago will come true. Again, it is actually ringing again.
It is probably better if I leave now, because it is now the fourth disturbance. Goodbye, dear friend. Tomorrow or Monday I will come back, because it will certainly not remain with these 4 disturbances so far.
Excuse me, please, I also do not know why today of all days there is constant disturbance. See you tomorrow or on Monday. Also goodbye, Ptaah.
Continuation of the conversation, Monday, 5th December, 2028 hours.
Nathan just left. Apparently you were watching us. But be welcome and greetings, Ptaah, dear friend.
No, I did not watch you, but Florina informed you that I would come here at 20:30 hours so that we could continue and finish our conversation, which we stopped on Saturday due to constant disturbances. Greetings also to you, Edouard, dear friend.
Then everything is fine, except what always happens with my computer, like yesterday again. In the evening, I am away from the computer to watch the news on TV in the living room over there, after which I watched a crime film with Eva. But I left my computer in the office switched on, but only in a local state, because I haven't been working with the central computer for some years now. But only locally, because time and again, when I was still connected to the central computer, I was maliciously tampered with in my work from outside. As you know, sometimes my written texts in the computer were simply rewritten in sentences, half pages or full pages, or whole sentence passages were deleted. Also, strange things were inserted into my written articles, etc. Like, for example, in Arabic language and writing a prayer to Allah, although I have no Arabic characters in my computer. And this has happened since 2001 and has happened again and again to this day, although you have taken all sorts of precautions to stop the whole thing. Unfortunately, however, this has not been of any use in this respect to this day, nor in the sense that very strange things happen again and again, even to this day, which are simply inexplicable and also arise in the direct presence of group members who can testify to this. They are simply unexplainable incidents, which one is not allowed to tell at the top of one's voice, Otherwise, one would be described as crazy, sick in the head, and crazy, because the whole thing cannot be understood by anyone, and therefore cannot be comprehended. That is why it is actually better not to talk about it, but recently there has been an increase in incidents, which is why I have to talk about it again. For 2 months now, a window has been constantly appearing on the computer screen saying that the computer databases have been damaged, and that the computer could suffer damage as a result. Besides, my paperwork is tampered with, as it has been since 2001, following the whole passage of texts disappearing, while on the other hand, words are simply deformed by having too many or too few letters in them. And this can happen 20-30 times on an A4 page. But now back to yesterday night. When I came back to the office at about 23 o'clock hours and wanted to turn back to my work at the computer, the internet was switched on, but not by myself, because I didn't use it yesterday at all. So there is only the possibility that from the outside into my computer hacked and a religious sectarian article was inserted, which included 46 A4 pages and was declared as follows.
2010 current date, I am love droplet of God from the heavenly source message of 21.09. 2010 false view and application of positive thinking with disastrous consequences. 46 pages, F2 AG, Ich bin Liebetröpfchen, Gottes, .day. Lebensrat Gottes, .day, as you can see here on this original on the screen.
Billy's computer screenshot taken on Sunday, the 4th of December, 2016. Billy's computer screen, Sunday, the 4th of December, 2016. Bildschirm des Computers von Billy Sonntag 4. December 2016.
As you know, we have been dealing with all these unpleasant phenomena since 2001, which do not occur anywhere in the center on other computers than yours. How, why, and where the whole thing appears. We have not yet been able to fathom why we only saw possibilities and realized them in a protective way in the center, which, however, did not bring any success until now. Even Zaphanat Paneach, who is very well versed and trained in the corresponding earthly computer technology, has so far been unable to find anything concerning the origin and the possibility of how everything can arise. It is also very puzzling to him how, despite our high technical and electronic means, which we use in cooperation with the Sonern, all the appropriate safety barriers can be circumvented or broken through. The Zaphanat Paneach employee, Yanarara, is a specialist in this field, so it is very useful that she and Zaphanat Paneach will devote themselves to all the strange occurrences in your workroom and your computer.
Yanarara, is she a Playarenin or a person from your federation?
Yanarara comes from the Dal universe and is a Sonoran.
Oh well, then I can also understand that she is a particular specialist in relation to the issues discussed. But tell me, dear friend, what is the correct name for the Sonair planet? Because I have heard different names from Quetzal, Asket, Nera, and Plasia.
Sonara is basically the correct name for the home planet of the Sonair, whereby Sonara has the meaning universe flower. In Sonar language, sun means universe, Ara means flower. In different languages, however, Sonara is pronounced quite naturally in a different way, so you have noticed linguistic differences in Quetzal, Plagia, Asket, and Nera with regard to the term Sonara.
Interesting, thank you. But tell me, Ptaah, can you remember what you said last year about the Indian MK?
Of course, why do you ask?
Yesterday evening, Christian told me that Michael Horn was in contact with this person, as well as that this Mahesh, or Mesh as he calls himself, was still cheerfully trying to make me look bad by lying and slandering me. Recently, he refers to the fact that I would contradict myself in the contact reports because I talked to you. It was in 1991 when the accident happened. about the accident of my daughter Gilgamesha, and asked you and said that you had not told me about it, and I knew nothing about it. And I said this, although your daughter Simyase had told me in the 1970s what would happen to Gilgamesha. But I had buried their predictions so deep inside me that I effectively didn't think about it when the misfortune happened. As your father Svath had taught me, I have usually buried in my memory many terrible predictions of Svath, Askit and Simyase, as well as of Quetzal and you, for it was and is simply unbearable in many cases to know when something specific will happen. Many things, especially personal and also those that affect my family and friendships, etc. I have always locked deep in the deepest drawer of my memory, which I still do today, and continue to do when you make predictions that affect me psychologically and consciously. Nowadays I often bury such knowledge so deep inside myself, as I have received predictions from Askit, Simyase, Quetzal, and you, that I don't even think about it anymore and just forget everything. Only sometimes, due to some special circumstances, memories of it come up again. Consequently, it also happens that sometimes I've been bumped off my head when a prediction is fulfilled, because I have simply completely forgotten it, like the accident that Gilgamesha had.
What my father taught you in this regard is known to me, and I must also say that you are absolutely right to bury certain predictions in yourself, as you say, that you even forget them, and are very strongly affected by them when a prediction is fulfilled. So it is normal that after such an event, when a shock occurs, it can even take a few days for the memory of a prediction to reappear. This Indian, however, who attacks you for reasons of hatred, is consciously too limited to think the whole thing over even halfway. As a result, he lacks and fails to have the necessary intelligence, as well as the intellect and reason that lie dormant in him, which is why he cannot understand, let alone judge, nor comprehend what it means for a human being to have prior knowledge of evil. Terrible, grave, evil, highly unpleasant, negative, bad, malicious, wicked, hurtful, and painful events, situations, and other unpleasant occurrences. And if you hadn't been prepared by my father for all the hundreds of predictions he revealed to you and taught, what you have to do about your memory and your recollections in order not to endanger your thoughts and feelings, and thus also your psyche and your mind, then you would never have coped with all the predictions. The fact is that even for us Ptaah very bad, negative and bad predictions in the way I have just mentioned would have equally very bad moral, psychological, and consciousness-related consequences, following that we usually, at least in a personal way, do not take into account any desire for foresight and foreknowledge. But what my father did with regard to your person in this regard had to be, because on the one hand it was so determined according to old Nocodemian records, and on the other hand it was necessary in connection with your mission. So it had to be assumed that only through the many hundreds of predictions that my father, Askit, my daughter Simyase Quetzal, and also I have made to you under the seal of silence, will you become morally, psychologically, and consciously strong and stable enough to fulfill your mission unswervingly. So the whole thing was unavoidable, which my father had already explained to you in the 1940s. And what you were already able to grasp intellectually at that time, and you also agreed to take everything upon yourself, even if you had to take your personal loneliness upon yourself as a result.
Sorry sometimes. Yes, it was necessary and not to change, but I'm glad that I really made it. And as for your father Svath, I am infinitely grateful to him for all that he has taught me and taught me. It is so effective that only through him, his efforts, teachings, and everything in general, could I create everything that has happened in my life.
It pleases me how much you value my father and all that he has taught you.
You can say that out loud, dear friend, and in my youth, along with my father and mother, he was really the only friend I had outside my family. All my schoolmates were simply comrades, but not what friends can be called. And in the surroundings of Niederflachs, where we lived, among the 4 boys and 3 girls who either still went to kindergarten or already went to the upper school classes, There were no other children with whom I could make friends, so these also simply remained comrades. And what was with the adults and much older people, with whom I often had conversations or sometimes gave them advice despite my young age? I considered them simply as adult fellow human beings, but also not as friends, but simply as people whom I had to honor and appreciate out of my own need. That was because even then I understood friendship to be something other than a simple camaraderie. So I considered only my father as a friend, my mother as a friend, and your father Svath as a friend. And later also Askit, Nera, and your daughters Sim, Yase, and Plaja, as well as you and Quetzal came into my circle of friends, but then also Anjana and Florina and some other of you Playaran. On Mother Earth herself, I must honestly admit, I never had any friendships, except father and mother, as is still the case today. Nevertheless, I have extremely pleasant relationships, such as with the group members, which I cannot, however, include in a mutual friendship, but only in a one-sided friendship that emanates from me, precisely according to how I see and understand a friendship relationship through the teachings of Svath. Nonetheless, I value, honor, and honor all group members, be they core group or passive members, but I do not do so in a simple camaraderie, but in a form that goes far beyond that and corresponds to a form of friendship, but not to an effective friendship as I judge it according to the teachings of Svath. For this way of my connection with the group members, also other people from outside, I have coined two terms for myself which go far beyond a simple camaraderie and somehow join a pre-friendship or approach a friendship. And these two terms I call philanthropy comradeship and sympathy connectedness comradeship, which correspond to a kind of consciousness kinship, brotherhood, trust, and unity connectedness.
I know that, and perhaps it would be good if you would say something openly about it in one of our conversations, through which other Earth humans also learn something about it, through which they read your explanations and statements when they are published. At least it would be necessary to talk a little about a real friendship in detail, because I know that terrestrial people think of it as something that has nothing to do with it. If you like, we can address this topic once, which would give a lot to say.
Of course, I can do that once in a while if the time comes.
That can also be now, because on the one hand, time is not running out on me, and on the other hand, I would like to hear what you have to explain for Earth humans regarding friendship. Although I know your attitude towards friendship, I am interested in how you interpret it.
If you say so, then I can do that if you don't have to leave quickly again. Then first of all I want to say,
time is not running out today, so we can have a longer conversation.
All right, here's the deal. For my part, I behave as a friend to all people from my point of view, including those who are against me and slander me. This is my behavior towards all people, whereby I may also say that I do not bring hate thoughts or feelings of hatred towards anybody and thus any person, even if he complains about me, lies to me or slanders me, etc.
Excuse me if I interrupt you, for I have an objection. I want to say something about it in order to correct in advance that this often happens, just that you are insulted, lied to, and slandered. This happens quite often, as I said, but you leave the persons concerned and defaming you in many ways of the naive belief that you would not realize their verbal underhand attacks.
Well, if you think it should be. Then from the point of view which I have taken from Svath and which I have kept throughout my life, and which I am sure I will bring together to some extent, I can explain an effective friendship in the form of an extensive set of prerequisites which, according to Svath's teaching, I put into my own words, and which applies to both the female and the male sex. So here's what I want to do. 1. An intimate and mutual intimacy must be a prerequisite for a true friendship. 2. In a true friendship, it is very important and must be self-evident that everything that arises can be talked about reasonably and confidentially. 3. A friendship must be guaranteed, and there must be certainty that confidential information will not be passed on. 4. In an intimate, true friendship, in addition to familiarity, there must also be the certainty that trust will continue to exist, even if contact with one another is broken for a longer period of time. 5. True friendship means that no untruths are ever told about each other's behavior, but only about the effective truths when it is necessary to talk about them for any reason. This means that if it is necessary, negative and bad as well as good and positive must be mentioned in the right context without adding or removing anything. 6. A true friendship requires that each friend can freely and openly represent his or her own views and opinions, even if there are differences of opinion and verbal arguments are made about them at the top of his or her voice. But in any case, they may be absolutely correct, factual and provocative, hardcore and merciless, but not insulting and therefore not incorrectly polemicizing. 7. An effective true friendship implies that when miswords are made or mistakes are made, in this regard without ifs and buts of forgiveness can be taken for granted. 8. A genuine true friendship requires that a tolerance and desire for correct pertinent criticism be given, just as open and honest words may and must always be spoken in every case. 9. A true, honest friendship requires that each party may and can unchallengedly keep its own secrets, because the personal keeping of secrets must always remain incontestably an absolutely personal affair. Even under friendship partnerships, and therefore under no circumstances may the ventilation or disclosure of a personal secret be forced by a friendship partner's side. And this also corresponds to a fact when lovers have personal secrets whose ventilation must not be forced. 10. A true, good, honest friendship implies that if the righteous and positive behaviors are correct, the friendship partners can give and behave as they are honorable so they do not have to pretend or deceive each other. 11. In a true friendship, each friend knows from the other how he leads his world of thoughts and which feelings move him accordingly. 12. In a true friendship, togetherness must be a basic rule and must also be cultivated and enjoyed. But this does not mean constant togetherness, constant planning or joint action, as well as non-permanent collective undertakings. 13. A true friendship requires that the friendship partners are there for each other, especially in those times when something goes wrong, problems arise, or for some reason the help of the other is needed. 14. An effective true friendship means that both friendship partners can always rely on each other, build each other up morally, motivate each other, support each other, and offer each other support in life and existence. 15. A true friendship is built up over a lifetime, which is why it usually takes, with very few exceptions, a lot of time to develop, as well as lasting and amicable love and care, both human and for the partner. A friendship usually does not develop from 1 hour to the next, or from 1 hour to the next, or from one day to the next, because a friendship bond develops through getting to know each other and growing together, which can only happen slowly with time and with common conversations. Experiences, etc. 16. A sincere, honest friendship requires sincerity, attention, and cultivated care, which must be cultivated to a sufficient degree. Only in this way can friendship grow and an ever deeper bond develop and remain. 17. A good and true friendship requires that in between, if necessary, open, hard, and enlightening conversations can be held, which may be very noisy if the situation requires it. However, being noisy should not lead to fights or quarrels, but should keep calm. 18. A good and lasting friendship requires that the balance of friendship is shown every now and then with loving gestures, attentive words, or small gifts, but this must not amount to a testimony, etc. 19. A true and good friendship implies equality of rights and duties, while taking into account special abilities in the exercise of the rights and duties of the respective partners of friendship. 20. A real good friendship requires that the effective truth always prevails between the friendship partners, which in this way must also be held externally for each other. Consequently, it must also be given externally for the friend that in every relationship only the truth is valid. Said and cultivated, consequently, no untruths or lies may be said or conjured up, even if the friend is harmed in any way. In principle, lies or untruths must not be used to try to preserve the friendship partnership or to save the friendship, for example, when court cases threaten, as in any other case. In my opinion, untruths or lies, which are spoken or even witnessed for the sake of friendship service and friendship partnership, negatively burden and destroy friendship. So a true, good, and effective friendship must be so firm and strong in every possible honest and righteous relationship that untruths or lies should never serve to save friendship. Truth is in this regard, and so I see that there is no real friendship if one lies to one another or for one another in such a relationship. 21. A true friendship must be such that there is empathy for one another. 22. An effective true friendship requires a sincere, honest love or friendship love, as well as correspondingly good, positive, and rich thoughts and feelings, and mutually reasonable and not abstract, not intellectual and not exaggerated decisions. 23. A genuine and good friendship requires a positive and preventive, valuable conflict management as a prerequisite, through which disputes are settled in the friendship before they break out, and which must be followed by the mutual friendship partners, as it were, seeking and implementing a guided mediation procedure. This is done in such a way that a mutually autonomous consensus is reached, or a common, recognized, and appropriate approval and agreement is reached. 24. Real friendship requires an inevitable dynamism, as well as a good flexibility with regard to the changes that appear in man, because these are inevitable as a result of evolution and aging. 25. A good, positive, and valuable friendship requires that no friendship partner ever agrees to compromise, because in principle, only clear agreements, decisions may be given and implemented. Compromises always and in any case mean that one friend should give in to one another and be taken advantage of, while the other should be given more rights. A compromise therefore means that one person must be accommodated and a compulsory agreement must be reached with him or her. 26. A real, true friendship is only then valuable and profitable if a face-to-face contact can be maintained, which is nowadays also possible via electronic technology or screens or monitors and Skype, if people go out of town or country or live in other countries. 27. A true friendship is based on an absolute voluntariness, never in the same way as with a family, into which the person is born and is then assigned to this more forced mass. 28. An effective true friendship requires a good and positive willingness to support all changes in friendship that occur, if they are not antisocial, criminal, or otherwise illegal, life-destroying, or life-threatening. 29. A good, real friendship requires, for example, that a certain sense of humor of any decent species is tolerated. 30. A friendship in an honest framework requires that friendship partners build up and strengthen each other in every necessary and important way, but also cultivate their equal rights. 31. A true friendship implies that everything and everyone can be discussed at any time with each other and among each other in complete openness, except for strictly personal secrets, which must always remain personal unless there is a personal need to talk about them. 32. A righteous friendship requires absolute loyalty, constancy with regard to stability, reliability, straightforwardness, steadfastness, immutability, sense of duty, secrecy, and loyalty. These values are the cornerstones of a true and lifelong friendship. 33. A friendship requires that both sides, all sides, when profound differences of opinion and problems arise that could almost degenerate into arguments, are willing and exercised to process everything sensibly in thought and feeling, and to find and work out a mutual consensus. 34. A true friendship is to be understood in the definition that it is based on an essential agreement concerning a harmonious community of persons, in which each person included in the friendship is respected, honored, appreciated, and appreciated for its own sake, everything being based on honesty, comradeship, fidelity, trust, and affection. 35. True friendship requires an appropriate genuine commitment to mutual interests. 36. An effective, good, real friendship requires mutual thoughts and feelings of responsibility, which must be perceived and translated into reality. 37. A true friendship requires the open pointing out in relation to one's own person that something is important to the other friend. Therefore, he is respected and appreciated, which of course must be the case on both sides. 38. An open, good friendship implies the need to accept expenses, deprivations, renunciations, sacrifices, etc., which should not, however, be regarded as sacrifices but, as a rule, as peculiarities or necessities related to the subject. 39. A true, real friendship requires a willingness to invest financial resources for fair purposes, if these are justified and helpful, but this is only of the right, if damage is not caused by negligent, asocial, criminal, or willful self-fault of a friend. However, if financial means are used to conceal a legal offense and thereby avoid a punishment under the law, that would be injustice and would destroy the relationship of trust of friendship for all time, because the memory of it could never be dissolved. 40. A true friendship requires that no false assertions may be made, false statements made or false testimonies given for or against one or the other of the partners of friendship, such as in disputes, hostilities, foreign rabble, foreign dealings, foreign conflicts, foreign confrontations and controversies, in foreign friction and quarrels, foreign feuds as well as in court proceedings, criminal proceedings, and legal disputes. 41. A person can only have a genuine and deep friendship with one or more other people if he himself is an effective friend to himself and to a relevant fellow human being. 42. A true friendship requires a friendship altruism or a friendship-related unselfishness. A lack of selfishness, empathy, willingness to help friends, tolerance, altruism, etc., which are great values of the breeding ground for a friendship. 43. A true friendship between two or more people requires that all respect, honor, and dignify each other, and that they prove to be worthy of humanity in their mutual opposition to each other. 44. An effective, true friendship requires that the mistakes and weaknesses of the friend are understood, but that these must be shown in an instructive way, so that the mistake can be corrected and brought into better and healthy forms. 45. A true good friendship does not require human perfection, for there is no such thing, neither the perfect girlfriend nor the perfect boyfriend. 46. A valuable and honest friendship in no way justifies an expectation and a demand that everything is always made flawlessly and correctly. 47. A good, healthy friendship requires that all the good qualities of the friend-partner are recognized and appreciated to the right degree, whereby mistakes must be taken into account and treated leniently. Because on the one hand, man can only learn by first making mistakes and then correcting them, and on the other hand, his whole life is oriented towards learning, which inevitably requires making mistakes. 48. A good friendship requires common interests and regular communication regarding personal views, which must be respected but discussed and rectified as necessary. 49. True friendship sometimes means that one or the other friend needs advice or even correction, but this should not be a problem in a good and real friendship. It is true that advice is not always easy to give when it is not asked for, but in a genuine friendship there must be the courage to give good advice unasked for and of one's own free will. In a manner of sensitiveness, an error is correctly pointed out and help offered. 50. A true friendship requires an absolute for one another and standing together through thick and thin, which in any case can only be in mutual righteousness, but must be excluded if honor, law, and dignity, the protection of life and limb of human beings are deliberately violated, or laws are deliberately violated in a punishable manner. 51. An effective, good, true, and valuable friendship between two or more people is like a single consciousness in two or more bodies. That is what I have to say and define in terms of genuine, true, effective friendship. But there are a number of other aspects that I would also like to mention below, even though we are already on the subject. The longing for an effective, true, and honest friendship is as old as mankind itself among the human beings of the earth, as probably everywhere in the universe. Finding truly true and good friendships that last a long life is extremely rare. The fact is that real friendships do mankind good in many ways, but he must first create them for himself if he actually manages to do so and can build up good relationships in this respect. Although then it is usually doubtful whether this is a real friendship, but not simply a comradeship, which in no way has anything to do with a real friendship that increases man's well-being. So when cronyism, good acquaintance, connecting comradeship or good companionship, etc. appear, they are usually no more and no less than simply functioning social relationships, according to which people live happier and healthier and not isolated. Thus, according to Svath and you, the whole of such social relationships is a natural means of reducing susceptibility to depression and the risk of cardiovascular disease. For example, but less stress hormones are released when being with friends in difficult situations, etc., because people feel calmer and safer when being with friends. If a person cultivates a good friendship, or several, then a different, better, more peaceful and more harmonious view of existence and life results, which also applies equally if there is a righteous philanthropy comradeship or sympathy connectedness comradeship, and thus, so to speak, a consciousness kinship, brotherhood, intimacy and harmony connectedness. It is also a fact that when people who are familiar with each other in a friendly partnership are open, honest, loving, and helpful to each other, as is also the case in a good connecting love in the alliance between two people, then dangers and problems are felt to be much less threatening. In addition, however, at those times when direct eye-to-eye communication takes place and is cultivated, personal joy and self-esteem are raised to a higher level. So cultivating a good friendship or several friendships is just as good as building and maintaining good relationships in the form of camaraderie, and thereby increasing well-being. It is a fact that if man, as a result of true friendship or comradeship, has righteous functioning social relationships, then he is thought, feel, psych consciously more puritanical about correctness. But it also determines other high values such as virtue, morality, chastity, and ethics, and it follows that it is also morally oriented towards stricter principles, such as morality. Also the basic objection, the goodness, the blamelessness, the indescribability and mobility and the satisfaction and health are more pronounced than with humans, who live isolated due to missing friendship, social relations, or lacking philanthropy comradeship, and or sympathy connectedness comradeship. Basically, it is not about having as many friendships as possible. So the quantity is absolutely insignificant, because effectively friendships, social relations, and philanthropy comradeship or sympathy connectedness comradeship is about quality. So it's absolutely not important to have as many friends as possible, as is the case with Facebook, where hundreds and thousands of people pretend to be friends and girlfriends for just about any Facebook users without really knowing them with an iota. These are truly not friendships. True, genuine, real and good friendships, as well as philanthropy comradeships, or sympathy connectedness comradeships, and other righteous social relationships and bonds are a great enrichment in life and contribute a tremendously powerful piece to the quality of life, and thus also to staying agile and vital in old age. In a true friendship, the friendship partners are always there for each other as best they can when they are needed. And help is always provided where help can be provided. But circumstances concerning and perpetrating punishable crimes, dishonesty, dignity, injustice, etc., are absolutely excluded. If a true friendship exists, then it doesn't matter for the friendship partners whether the face is made up and the hair styled, no matter what the person looks like, because no person is perfect, and consequently, it is also possible to overlook the quirks that a friendship partner has per se. Basically, it is also important in these relationships to first become aware of what a true friendship personally means, as well as to ask whether one's own person is a good friend. Unfortunately, many people can be found in life who are considered suitable for friendships, especially through advertisements published in magazines, newspapers, internet blogs, and Facebook, but unfortunately only in the greatest need or through great financial damage it is recognized whether they do justice to the term friendship. Many of the antisocial relationships that arise through such media or through occasions or private meetings under the dirty guise and abused term friendship are truly not friend requests, but only criminal machinations. In this way, lonely, unneeded, naive, and even stupid friendship seekers are deceived. On this perfidious tour, many women and men fall for fraudsters and swindlers who are not looking for honest and good friendships, but on the one hand only degenerating sex adventures, or on the other hand stupid or people, to whom they can take their wages, their old age pension, and even their entire fortune through lies and fraud. The aggrieved become thoughtless, and even insane victims of the fraudsters and swindlers. Believe their lies carelessly and usually do not let the financial, psychological, and conscious damage suffered deter them from their delusion. It is rarely possible to make it clear to such delusional people that these friendships are only lies and deception, that consequently very few start to think about them and turn away from the friendly criminal rip-offs, deceivers, and liars and have them prosecuted by the police. And the bottom line for these people, usually women who allow themselves to be financially excluded and exploited by criminals as a result of false friendship, is that they lose their fortunes and accumulate large debts in order to continue to supply the criminal rip-offs with money and ultimately possibly become in need of social assistance. In order to get through life well, these people must learn to trust only themselves and their own minds as well as their own reason and always help themselves in any case. However, this requires on the one hand that a clear mind and reason must be developed and used so that the necessary self-confidence can also be built up and used. The trust of others who only call themselves friends is worth as much as a burnt-out wick of a candle. True, honest, effective, and good friendship must be developed over a long period of time, for it can never be simply given in blind trust or created by blind hope. True friendship does not consist of blind trust, for such a trust, like friendship itself, must be earned first. First and foremost, a person must first be confronted in a neutral and unbiased manner in order to get to know him, and thereby give him the opportunity to express his views in any way he can think of. This is the only way to ensure that everything that is necessary is experienced, which can serve to develop a friendship. It is a fact that everyone defines a friendship differently, but does not mean a real friendship in line and thread, as I have explained in the 51 points according to the teachings of faith. Consequently, as a rule, only fragile and unrhymed social relationships and acquaintances are meant by friendship and come into being. Therefore, it is not understood, as I have already mentioned, that a real friendship must function like an alliance or a good marriage, in which good and bad days appear, which must be managed together in a uniform way, no matter what happens. But this does not work in many so-called friendships any more than it does in many alliances or marriages, because in reality they are not given as such, but exist in imaginary realms of consciousness and thoughts. And that this corresponds to the effective truth is something that all those people who lead false and constantly contentious as well as dissatisfied friendships and alliances or marriages do not want to admit. Consequently, they also do not like the truth that is told to them in this respect, precisely because they do not appreciate the knowledge that is given to them in this respect. True, intimate, honest, real, and effective friendships are few and far between among mankind, except for the unreal and illusionistic portrayals in films that give a completely false picture of friendship. In reality, the majority of terrestrial mankind no longer cares about profound friendships, but only about the electronic nonsense which it has made into friendship, and thus completely neglects social relations with fellow human beings. Only superficial illusory relationships are searched for and accepted, whereby even simple comradeships are out. Correctly seen, friendships are actually only old and useless formulas existing on paper, which are nowadays only used to somehow justify any contact with another person. But for the majority of people on Earth today, that is still the only thing they want to have, and anyone who wants more than that, such as a good camaraderie, a social relationship, or even a friendship, gets to hear all sorts of derogatory and malicious things, whereby the lack of time is also cited as the ultimate due to a lot of pleasure-seeking, and as a result of this today, there is no longer any room for real friendships. On the other hand, there are also many people who would like to have contact and social relationships as well as comradeships, etc. with other people. But the hustle and bustle in everyday life and the morbidly stupid attitude of the majority of human beings on Earth to occupy themselves only monotonously, complacently and selfishly according to their own mistaken and confused ideas of life does not allow them to make use of their intellect and reason. So it happens that otherwise many people are quite lonely and can't talk to anybody anymore. Hardly any more does a lonely person find anyone with whom he can communicate sensibly, although he longingly strives to find someone who can still be addressed empathetically. For someone who seeks in vain a good, righteous social acquaintance, relationship and connection, and who would like to talk to a fellow human being, this is a real torture. It all had to be said.
And that is a good thing, because your words belong in the ears of earthlings and in their intellect and reason.
This would also be the case with the sneaky political machinations of various states in which the stupid, banging heads of politicians and rulers believe that they alone have to protect national interests in their own country. In this madness, however, they unjustifiably and defamatory attack other countries and their rulers through sanctions, lies, slander, hate speech, and aggression. And very unfortunately, this is also happening in Switzerland by certain unneeded, crazy and Russia-hostile politicians, but which is a very clear case. This is practiced especially by the world domination-addicted USA, as well as by the entire state-eating EU dictatorship. In their naivety and stupidity, all these politically unfit creatures prove their inability to lead a state, and do not recognize and understand that they would have to establish and maintain relations in a peaceful, understandable and good manner with their political colleagues and the statesmen of other countries without attacks in a decent manner. With their sick brains, the aggressors and agitators of the USA and the EU dictatorship, as well as certain stupid Swiss citizens and politicians, who are particularly raving against Russia, do not understand that with their hostility towards other countries they represent completely wrong positions in terms of opinion and politics, and that they walk in ways that lead to great misfortune and prevent any effective peace on earth. It does not make sense to these stupid fools that it is absolutely necessary and right to respect and defend one's own national interests in order to protect one's homeland, but that it is absolutely wrong and incorrect not to respect and defend the protection and national interests of all other countries as well. And since those stupid Swiss, as well as those many citizens of the USA and the EU dictatorship, heat up the aggressions, war inflammations and hate speeches especially against Russia by lying and slanderous political propaganda, it is absolutely clear that no peaceful coexistence and cooperation between the West and Russia can come about. As a result, the Eastern and Western countries suffer great economic and cultural losses, which are lost due to the many differences between the West and East, especially Russia.
What should I say about that? Because what you have said is true.
But there is more to be said. But with regard to the fact that the criminal overpopulation, which continues to grow rapidly, is leading to ever worse forms of destruction and disorder all around. If, for example, one considers that the degenerated excesses caused by the increasing mass of people in the relationship are progressing rapidly, that more and more young people and older people are brutally beating and even armed against state officials, against the police and security forces, as well as against harmless passers-by, attack them, beat them down, injure and even kill them, because they can no longer defend themselves against the rabid attackers, then this is a sign and the beginning of the fact that anarchism is no longer far away. Violence against policemen has been increasing for years. Police officers and politicians are hoping in vain for improvement through tougher sanctions, with effectively good reasons to tighten the screw more to tackle the verbal and violent attacks against officials, police, and security forces. The more the overpopulation grows, the more people become constantly violent, with young people and older people in particular becoming uninhibitedly violent, discharging their accumulated aggressions against civil servants, police officers, and security forces, with all forms of violence ranging from verbal to physical violence, including assault and battery and killings. In this respect, there is a growing and accelerating lack of inhibition, which is effectively spreading. The reasons for this, as well as for the rapid increase in violence against civil servants, police officers, and security forces, but also against harmless passers-by, are manifold. Many people today, in particular young people and medieval people, in general allow themselves to be advised and told less or nothing more by authorities, whereby there is no longer any question of prescribing anything at all, That, as in the past, reasonable rules of order could still be made, and that these were followed as a matter of course for the sake of their own respect, honor, and security, as well as for the sake of dignity and order. Today, however, there is a contrary tendency, which brings disaster and with which not only the officials, police, and security organs have to fight, but also many parents, other educators, and also the population in general, who are attacked, beaten, and beaten to death or kicked to death on the open street, in public places, etc., by degenerate adolescents and older degenerates. In addition, there is the fact that sports events are also used for effective terror, with an increase in the propensity to violence, especially in connection with football and ice hockey matches, as well as unsportsmanlike occasions and unauthorized demonstrations, but also in schools. Degenerate terrorists often ignite dangerous fireworks, but they also use batons, ball rackets, knuckles, knives, long and handguns, as well as all kinds of stabbing weapons, which can injure or kill people dangerously. Civil servants, policemen, and security forces are not immune to violence, although it is said that they are friends and helpers of the population, but in reality they are nowadays only used as beaters and footcasts, because the violence done to them by yesterday's, today's, and tomorrow's generations is already part of the normal occupational risk in everyday life. And despite bans on hooding, this is despised, hence hooded police patrols, police stations, and security forces attack. And this violence becomes more and more blatant, whereby the attackers not only become more and more vicious and violent, but want to kill effectively. Gewalteinheit of every kind and up to murder and manslaughter against female and male public officials, police officers, security forces, and passers-by, as well as in schools, in the military, at events, and especially in evil and badly managed families, is increasing more and more. And this is an inevitable consequence of the rapidly growing overpopulation, from which more and more psychopathically predisposed human beings are emerging and degenerating into vicious, negatively violent behavior. This is also due to a lack of education, unemployment, withering social relationships, general indifference, and the degenerations, brutality, G-vault, and human depravity shown in all media and films. The general indifference and contempt of earthly humanity with regard to the protection of life and limb has fallen to an all-time low in human history. And this cannot be compared with the horrors and atrocities of the 3 world wars of 1756, 1763, and 1914, 1918, and 1939, 1945, for these are 3 other inglorious murderous episodes in the history of Earth humans. Of course, murder and manslaughter, family dramas, wars, their spouses, friends, children, and cronies beating, bludgeoning, and murdering men and women have always been. This cannot be denied, but by the madly growing overpopulation, all malicious, negative, and destructive machinations resulting from it become more and more degenerate, violent, and irresponsible, worse, and not more intellect and rationality based. And the media, as I said, contribute enormously to this, as do the religions and sects which preach the imaginary punishment of God according to their holy books, and do not understand that this nonsense contributes a great deal to all evil and evil. This is precisely because the mad believers of earth interpret all nonsense in such a way that, if God already punishes the people, they advocate acts of war by priests and clergymen, etc., blessed weapons for wars, having divine punishments carried out and thus teaching violence, etc., then man should probably also do so. So it is not surprising that wars rage, the death penalty, hatred, murder, and manslaughter, as well as discord and destruction, etc., are widespread. Threats, violence, rape, as well as murders, deadly brawls, deadly family dramas, as well as all kinds of criminality and crimes have increased tremendously fast worldwide since the turn of the millennium alone, whereby in the last 16 years alone, violent attacks against civil servants, police, and security forces have increased by more than 270%. The continuing rise in violence, which is constantly growing in relation to the increase in overpopulation, is having a very massive impact on those affected by the violence. If they are not killed, then in addition to simple physical damage, serious psychological illnesses appear in the worst case, as well as insecurities of various kinds. The whole thing can, however, also lead to a readiness to use violence and the use of violence in victims of violence. However, the uncontrolled increase in overpopulation is also having a disastrous effect on the existence and life of all life forms, with particular reference to the fauna and flora, which are being increasingly impaired and destroyed by the machinations of overpopulation. As a result of the Earthlings' madness to create offspring, more and more fertile agricultural and garden areas are being built up, which on the one hand should secure food cultivation for human beings, but on the other hand also form the habitat of fauna and flora. But fauna and flora are losing all their habitats due to overpopulation, because the inexorably growing mass of selfish Earth humans is poisoning and destroying more and more fertile land, food areas for all wildlife and all plant life, as well as building and concreting them over with more and more new residential buildings, roads, paths, farm buildings and factories, etc. Pathologically stupid and even poorly reasoned experts claim that the growth of mankind is decreasing, which contradicts what the Pleiadians state year after year. Namely, that the growth of mankind is continuously increasing. Consequently, on the 31st of December 2015, exactly 8,634,006,014 equal sign, that is to say 8.634 billion people have populated Earth. According to Pleiadian data, earthly mankind grows every year by a number of more or less 100 million, whereby the whole is increasing. Therefore, it is stupid and idiotic illusory from the experts to claim that only in the year 2050 an Earth population of 10 billion is to be expected. So if there were already more than 8.6 billion people on Earth at the beginning of 2016, then it has to be said that earthly experts, who carry out counts with regard to earthly humanity, in reality make only very inaccurate estimates with regard to the entire earthly mankind, and therefore cannot calculate the actual number of people who populate Mother Earth. To put it bluntly, the entire terrestrial human population is lied to in this respect by the experts in brand black, as well as with regard to the facts destroying the fauna and flora with regard to the construction of the fertile land areas important for this, and also the terrestrial humanity, as well as the forests, which are also very necessary and extremely important for the existence and life of man, as well as for the existence of all genera and species. If mankind cannot control its own reproduction, then it really means its end in the end, and that will be very bitter. And so it will be if only 2/3 are to be wiped out by epidemics, wars, natural disasters, and crimes, as prophesied from time immemorial. And that something will happen in any such or similar way is already clearly apparent on the horizon of the fate of earthly mankind, because the whole disaster of destruction, which happens through the criminal machinations of the previous overpopulation of the climate, on practically all inland waters, the seas, forests, and the fertile land, has been taking its toll worldwide for quite some time. This is denied by all those irresponsible, stupid, and insane experts and truth negotiators who are either horrendously paid for their lies by corporations and governments, or who are already so effectively stupid that they go blindly or with blinders through the world and do not perceive the truth. In fact, however, some form of apocalypse by overpopulation has already become possible, which earthly mankind is now definitely heading for. And this statement has absolutely nothing to do with panic-mongering, but only with the effective truth, which should cause every earthling legitimate worries. The growing overpopulation threatens already now in the beginnings begun the existence of many humans, but scholars argue about it already for approximately 200 years. Without those clever heads, which were among these disputables or are also today, could penetrate so far with the stupid and crazy Fashkolligan. The fact is that until the 18th century, confused economists believed, and this is still assumed today, that the growth of the world population would also increase the economic performance of every country. It was also openly explained, as for example by a certain Thomas Robert Malthus, that food production only increased linearly, but humanity increased exponentially and thus much faster. It was proclaimed that if humanity was not forced into sexual abstinence through marriage prohibitions, then it was inevitable that poverty, misery, and hunger would spread in such a way that humanity would sink into them. Just as his words disappeared into oblivion back then, so did my warnings about overpopulation, which I have been making since the 1950s. And so is it today, when the truth is warned about the catastrophes already underway and to come, for mistaken and confused or criminal. Paid experts, as well as know-it-alls who contradict the truth, are able to use the ignorance of the ignorant people to win them as antagonists against the effective facts. When listening to the ecologists who, in their ignorance of the effective truth, want to determine the maximum number of specimens of a species on Earth, what they call carrying capacity, they are so disunited and foddery among themselves that they all arrive at extremely different results, none of which corresponds to reality. And this refers equally to how many people a certain habitat is really able to feed, if it is used at all as a food space, but it is probably not calculated how much of it also the entire wildlife living in this space needs for food. Thus it is given that with all the hopeless attempts to calculate the food planting demand area for mankind all over the world, nothing but false results are achieved. On the one hand, this is due to the many important parameters involved in the game. And on the other hand, the food envy and dogmatism of the narrow-minded scientists also play their part in the fact that no correct and uniform results are achieved. For these reasons, it results that up to the present time in the guild of the demographers and/or the high-flown population scientists, abysmal pessimists, as well as eco-optimists can be found, who despite all worldwide destruction of nature and its fauna and flora, the climate, the seas and inland waters, like the dwindling earthly resources for endless criminal exploitation, still see the sky on Earth. It was in 1968 that a certain Paul R. Ehrlich in the population bomb called the human carrying capacity of Earth with a number of 1.2 billion. Although the overpopulation already then amounted to 3,700,641,801 human beings. At the present time, respectively on the 31st of December 2015, the overpopulation of Earth was, as already mentioned, exactly 8,634,006,014 equal sign respectively, 8.634 billion human beings, whose number will increase again at the end of this month, according to your Playaran new registrations, probably again against 100 million. And this is so, although earthly better knowers of the population counters etc. claim that more than 1 billion are less, consequently only about 7,480,000,000 human beings. Well, there was a systems theorist in the 1970s named Cesare Marchetti, who, like many others, was of the mistaken belief that there was much more room for earthlings on Earth, as he wrote in an essay in which he made the mad-lying claim that Earth could carry and nourish 1 trillion people when urban gardens were in place. Garden cities would be built, landscaped, and stuffed with microorganisms, creating enough food for humanity. And just as the systems theorist Cesare Marchetti hatched this nonsense brain-ill, many scientists today continue his idea in such a way that general progress in every respect compensates for all the negative consequences of the growth of overpopulation. In this respect, the Danish scientist Esther Boserup also hit the same horn in an unaccountable way, by claiming that her research in developing countries had confirmed that population growth led to innovations in agricultural technology. But in no way did it take into account the fact that the fertile soils and lands are increasingly being built over with houses, factories, roads and paths, etc., and are being destroyed hopelessly. Following soil and garden and farmland are dwindling just as much as the forests, meadows and pastures, which are just as vital for the survival of the very important wildlife of all genera and species as they are for humanity's ability to survive. But I think that for today I have said enough again. What is heard in the ears of earthlings, which however, due to false information by know-it-alls and purchasable experts and scientists does not want to be heard and is denied. Consequently, everything will remain with the old destroyer and drive Earth with its rapidly increasing overpopulation again and again into new and constantly worse catastrophes, whereby especially also enormous natural catastrophes will cause more and more disaster and will make the people of Earth their earthly homeland hell.
You have really said, elaborated, explained, and clarified enough what should really suffice for today. Therefore, I think that we should now only discuss a few concerns about what is to happen under 4 ears.
Good, and I will keep that in mind with the under 4 ears. Then I think you should start now with what you have to say.